Hello, this is Michael Tracy. In this video, we'll again take a look at the issues surrounding oxygen bottle number 9 and how, as more information comes out, the fake narratives have more difficulty being maintained. But first, for some new information about historical oxygen bottles on Mount Everest. The following is from Guy Cotter, recounting his 1993 climb on the south side of Everest. After I helped our Sherpa set up our sleeping tents, I wandered around to see if I could find any of the ancient oxygen bottles I left back in 1953. I'd heard they were now worth a handsome sum, so it felt worthwhile going on a treasure hunt. I didn't find any, but I was shocked to come across a dead body just a couple of 100 meters from the tents. That's around the South Col area. While Cotter was on the south side, and thus was only interested in 1953 bottles, it is difficult to believe that someone would be paying a, quote, handsome sum for 1953 bottles, but would be completely uninterested in 1924 bottles that were found high on the mountain. At that point in time, the only previous 1924 bottles found on the upper mountain were found by the Chinese in 1960, who reportedly found 2 oxygen bottles above the second step. This is from Reinhold Messner's The Second Death of George Mallory. Later, the Chinese announced that during the disputed 1960 ascent, the climbers found a stick, a piece of rope, and 2 oxygen bottles above the second step. Given that between 1924 and 1960, only Mallory and Irvine could have climbed beyond the second step, this seems to be evidence that one or perhaps both of them either had climbed or detoured around this difficult step. It is important to break down exactly what Messner is saying. First, the Chinese reported 2 oxygen bottles having been found above the second step. This does not mean directly on top of the second step, or even within 50 or 100 feet of the second step. 10 feet below the summit is above the second step, as is about 700 vertical feet of mountain. The more important point is that nothing indicates which route or potential route the bottles were found on. Messner clearly says that the bottles, if they were indeed found as the Chinese claimed, would imply that Mallory and Irvine had either climbed the second step or detoured around it. As such, Messner clearly felt that there was some detour around the second step. Much has been made about rumors from a guy who heard from a guy that Messner said there was no detour. As I prefer sources from the actual person, I use that Messner mentioned a detour around the step as being possible. Given that this isn't a published book, it is not an offhand comment, and Messner had plenty of time to think through what the Chinese find, if true, would really mean. Messner goes on to state why he did not believe the Chinese account, mainly because the Chinese did not produce the items. And while not detailed in that book, The Second Death of George Mallory, Messner also does not think the Chinese climbed the second step or ever got above it. What is curious is that various internet commentators believe the Chinese account that they climbed the mountain at night without water and somehow left a bust of Chairman Mao on the summit. These same people that believe every word the Chinese about their summit climb will not believe the Chinese when they say they found 2 oxygen bottles above the second step. Instead, the argument is made that if Mallory and Irvine did get above the second step, there would be some evidence of it. Well, there is this evidence. The Chinese claimed to have found 2 oxygen bottles above the second step and now have changed their story and say, no, they didn't. In terms of analyzing the argument of if they indeed got above the second step, there would be evidence of it, it is largely irrelevant whether the Chinese actually found the items or not. If the Chinese did find anything, either in 1960 or 1975, it is extremely unlikely that they would admit to it today. As Mallory and Irvine's 1924 route and any potential Chinese route would overlap at the third step and continue to overlap to the summit, if Mallory and Irvine left any evidence on that portion, it would have been collected by the Chinese. If there were any evidence left by Mallory and Irvine above the second step, it has long been gathered up by the Chinese and disappeared. Those items could include the 2 oxygen bottles the Chinese claim to have found above the second step, or perhaps the claimed oxygen bottles could be as fake as the bust of Chairman Mao. But the 2 oxygen bottles found by the Chinese are not the only disappearing oxygen bottles from 1924. We also have the 2 oxygen bottles that Eric Simonson claimed to have seen in 1991. First, a bit about the 1991 expedition. The expedition was led by Eric Simonson and consisted of 18 Americans, 2 New Zealanders, and 1 Australian. In addition, 11 Sherpa and 2 Nepalese cooks. Of interest is Simonson's summit, which occurred on May 15th, and he was accompanied by team members Dunn, Politz, Solzhen, Lakpa-Dorji, and Anj Dawa. The expedition also had a research component, with Dr. Mann examining the glacial moraines in the Rongbuk Valley, and Dr. Almeida studying oxygen saturation levels. Also on the expedition was videographer Marcus Houtnak, who videoed all the way to the summit, taking over 30 hours of video in total. In addition, there was footage shot by Mark Fetu and Charlie Peck. Despite more than 30 hours of footage, including all the way to the summit, no photo or any video of any 1924 oxygen bottle has ever come out of that 1991 expedition. In terms of Mallory and Irvine, Simonson was keenly interested in the 1924 expedition, with the following coming from the Himalayan database. Second step is quite steep. Quote, "No way Mallory and Irvine climbed that route." And someone had left the ladder there, which was very helpful. There's no mention of any 1924 oxygen bottles in the Himalayan database entry or any other publication made at that time. Simonson would return to the north side in 1994, but only in the role of the expedition leader. He wouldn't climb to the summit. The expedition was, again, large, 20 Western climbers, and again had a research component. This time Nabisco sent 2 scientists to conduct nutritional research. No attempt was made to retrieve, photograph, or verify the location of any 1924 oxygen bottles. The first mention of 1924 oxygen bottles is in relation to the 1999 expedition. There, it was reported that Simonson remembered seeing bottles, plural, located beneath a large boulder. That large boulder was initially identified as this rock here by Jake Norton, and it is clearly a large and prominent boulder, such that if an oxygen bottle was located underneath it, it would be easy to locate. Jake would later change his mind and move the location it was supposedly found at. He changes it numerous times, and he now claims he has no idea where the bottle was found, just sort of in that general area somewhere. Of the 1999 find, there are conflicting reports, with Peter Furstbrook, the producer of the 1999 Lost on Everest show, reporting that 2 bottles were recovered, while Eric Simonson reported only 1 bottle, and only 1 bottle has ever been shown publicly. The story about who found the bottle and under what circumstances has also changed over the years, but the new revised super final version is that it was found by Tap Richards alone, and no one else saw where he was. Nor is it known if Tap Richards took any photographs of the bottle when it was found, or if Tap Richards remembers anything about it. Richards, for his part, has remained completely silent about the issue for the past 25 years. I did reach out to him several years ago, but never heard anything back, and I'm not going to hound someone down who clearly does not want to talk. In terms of the potential location of the oxygen bottle, we will look at the recent drone footage from a Chinese team, but there is no possible way oxygen bottle number 9 was in any location covered by the 1933 team, and their illustrated photo shows they covered every possible route high on the ridge between their high camp and the first step. In addition, the Chinese in 1960 and 1975 also covered similar terrain, and other than the 2 bottles they claimed to have found above the second step, there were no reports of any additional oxygen bottles. Had they found any, they would have recovered them. Now, let's walk through the drone footage, and it will be a little difficult because the lens compresses the distances. Using Google Earth, the distance between the top of the exit cracks and the base of the first step is approximately 1,000 feet, or a little over 300 meters. On these drone photos, the distance will look much shorter than they actually are. But let's start from down lower and identify some key landmarks we will work with. This line marks the distance between the top of the exit cracks and the base of the first step. That is about 1,000 feet straight line distance. The 1933 high camp was here, and the ice axe was found behind the text that says Yellow Band. You can just barely see the large boulder next to the first step, which was the location initially identified as where oxygen bottle number 9 was found. Going up a little further, this location here is 1960 Camp 7 Alpha. That was the staging camp where their cooker was blown out. They would then move Camp 7 up to Camp 7 Bravo, which is in the nook of the first step. The ice axe was found just to the west of what would later become Camp 7 Alpha, so it is a very useful reference point. We don't know the precise location of the ice axe to the nearest foot, but it was about 10 to 30 feet to the west of that rock platform that would become Camp 7 Alpha. The rock platform is still visible here. West is to the right in all of these photos. The ice axe was found very close to that, but we don't know if it was on the line which leads more up the mountain or the one that leads more across the mountain, as both allow access to the first step and both were climbed in 1933. For comparison, this is a photo I took from below, which shows the region between Camp 7 Alpha and the base of the first step, and you can get a better perspective of the distance involved. I'll also show this photo here, which gives a better view of Camp 7 Alpha and its surrounding area. So the ice axe was found some rather short distance to the right of that Camp 7 Alpha location. And finally, this photo, which is looking at Camp 7 Alpha and the area leading up to it. From this, you can see that there are numerous rocks or boulders in this area, and for anything to be considered a prominent boulder, it would really need to be something large and something that really stood out if somebody was going to find the oxygen bottle quickly, which they did in 1999. Moving up to the first step, you can clearly see the path that makes up the modern route as that trail in the snow. You can also see the large boulder is nowhere near the route. Instead, it is next to the 1960 Camp 7 Bravo, which is marked here. Anyone coming out of that Camp 7 Bravo would have passed that large boulder. The notion that the 1933 team and the 1960 team didn't find any oxygen bottles there is ridiculous. Equally ridiculous is that Eric Simonson was able to see the bottle from the standard 1991 route, and the 5 other people climbing with him were not. Of course, there are different versions of what Simonson saw and where exactly he saw it. For this, I will play the following clip from Tom Pollard that explains why I do not believe anything that these people tell us.
I think that, like fishermen, mountain climbers tend to be really good liars because we tell stories about how crazy things were, and none of it's really always true. But
Tom is going to recycle a bunch of old debunked nonsense, put a clickbait title on it, and push out his quota of new videos for the week. This is what YouTube forces people to do. But nothing forces anyone to watch them, and I don't see it as my job to respond to every inane theory being pushed on YouTube. For Mallory and Irvine, most rational people came to the exact same conclusion as Dave Hahn.
Definitely after looking into it on 3 different expeditions, realizing, oh, they weren't on our modern route because they didn't know about our modern route.
That is the exact same detour around the second step that Messner was talking about. The recent discussion about oxygen bottle number 9 is just another example of people pushing debunked nonsense while ignoring the glaring problems with the complete lack of disclosure from the same team that is selling you their mystery. Eric Simonson is still alive. Why not just ask him exactly where he saw the bottles and why no one else saw them, and why he didn't tell anybody about it for years? Tad Richards is alive. Why not ask him where he found it, if he took any photographs of it? Instead of open discussions, we have disappearing items. There are reports of 2 bottles found, but only 1 turned in, and even that one's current location is a complete mystery. Conrad Anker reported 2 gloves were found in Mallory's pockets, but only 1 has been turned over to the Royal Geographical Society. Numerous notes and papers were found in Mallory's pockets, but only 4 letters have been turned over to a legitimate archive, with the location of the rest a complete mystery. I have numerous videos available that analyze the actual evidence, the statements made by George Mallory himself about which routes he took or would not take, a detailed analysis of the oxygen equipment, how much it weighed, how many liters of oxygen each bottle held, and how the bite valve mechanism works. I just don't see any mysteries left that can be realistically addressed without an additional find. If Irvine's body is found with summit rocks in his pocket, then people don't need my analysis to see they reached the summit. If the rocks are from the thrombolite layer, they don't need my analysis to see that they didn't. Now, all that rampant speculation and rehashing of old evidence going on over at the Everest Mystery Channel is phenomenally great for my channel. Most of the new viewers coming to my channel are coming from watching Tom's video. He produces a large number of videos with flashy titles, the exact type of clickbait that YouTube rewards. For the people genuinely interested in the 1924 expedition, most end up in my channel, but I am not going to produce a bunch of videos rehashing old ideas every time some crazy new theory comes up. And yes, Mallory and Irvine taking 3 ice axes so that they can leave one as a marker is completely crazy theory, unsupported by any evidence. It is the quintessential inventing facts to fit your theory, rather than inventing a theory that fits the facts. I have a detailed theory that explains every single known fact. It is described in the Watch video. but much of the supporting analysis is spread over numerous other videos. I will put together a comprehensive video at some point, but the information is already available in the dozens of other videos. Viewers will just have to work a little bit to find all the information. But no doubt people will continue to ignore this wealth of information and continue to speculate about what the talking heads on YouTube tell them to speculate about. It is like that old Yeti saying, you can lead a fool to knowledge, but you can't make him think.